In this lesson, we're going to combine some of the methods we've learned so far to create the look of a pie chart that's revealing from its center. Okay, so we're going to learn yet a third way to create a circle that we haven't used yet. So come up here, go to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll just use this default color for now, but in a moment we can change that. And I'm going to now add an effect to it that will generate a circle. So go up to Effect, Generate, and then come down here to Circle. So that's going to be right underneath Checkerboard. And you see that that defaults to white, but we can see that there's a small circle right there in the middle of our comp. Now I want to color pick from the swatches that we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back up to the top of my stacking order just so I can keep track of that. And extend this out so it lasts the length of my comp. And we'll turn back on that eyeball just so we can see that a little bit better. And now with the solid that we used to create that, go ahead and color pick that red color just so that we can see this a little bit better than what we had with the white. Now I'm going to turn those swatches off for a moment. And now you can select this, and you may want to change the name of this to red circle or generated red circle, something like that. And that's just going to help you keep up with that layer a little bit better. And now, if we want to change the size of this circle, we have to do it through the effect settings up here for the effect controls. So come up there to where it says radius, and you can just kind of drag that out there. And I'm going to drag this up to about 240. So it's going to be a pretty large circle, maybe just right around there, 235. And you may ask yourself why we're creating a circle in this way instead of using the shape tool or masking a solid like we have earlier. And the reason is this automatically creates a circle that has a mathematically perfect center right in the middle of that circle. So the anchor point is automatically going to be right there. So it makes it really easy if you want to do rotation animation or the animation that we're about to add to this. So let me show you how to add this radial wipe. Now this is also going to be an effect that's added. So we'll come back up here, make sure you have red circle selected, go up to Effect, and it's going to be under Transition. So come down there to Transition, it's the third from the bottom, and then go down to Radial Wipe, which is the second from the bottom inside of that transition menu. And it doesn't add any keys for us automatically. We're going to have to add those here in a second. So if I just begin to kind of change this angle here and then change the transition, you're able to see how this kind of interacts together. So what I'm wanting it to do is to start out at 100%, which really kind of looks like 0%. So that can be confusing. And that's really just because this is one of those effects that's kind of geared to a transition out. So our shape would already be here and we would transition out from it. But we can change the settings to be a little bit backwards so that we can make it a transition in as well. So it's just going to take a little bit of thinking to get this to work in the opposite direction. So go ahead and let's just turn the start angle back to 0. And then I want my transition to start at 100. So right about where our zoom happens is where I want this to start. So I'm going to go ahead and set a key there for the transition completion at 100%. And you can go ahead and hit that U key to bring the key up if you want to see that keyframe on the timeline. Then I'm just going to drag forward a little bit and we'll drag this back down to 0%. So now if we scrub this, we see how that kind of looks together. Now, I feel like it looks a little bit strange for this to be going counterclockwise, but it says that it's going clockwise here on our options. And the reason why is simply because we started at 100% and ended at 0. So if we change the setting to be counterclockwise instead, now it's going to appear that it's moving clockwise. So we just have to switch these settings around to get this looking correct. So now this is transitioning just in the way that you would want it to. So it's starting out there at the top and then moving all the way back around, and then it continues as we scrub. So this is going to allow us to put some information on this circle and really just make a nice composition. Okay, so now before I do anything else, I want to go ahead and turn this into a 3D layer. So you can go ahead and hit that 3D switch, and then we'll go ahead and pull that back over up to the rest of our composition. And I want to push this back in Z space a little bit, just so that I am making sure that it's behind my little guy. And you also could even just drag that underneath the person icon in the stacking order, and that will do the same thing. So I'm going to bring this up here just so you can see that. Let's put it above our videos layer as well. So we have our person and then our circles just right underneath that. Okay, so now I maybe want this to be just a little bit bigger than it is, even though it's behind our person. And then I'll just scoot this over a bit. And now what I want to do is duplicate this circle so I have 3 circles all next to each other. So with my circle selected on the timeline, I'm just going to hit Control D a couple times. And then we can move these over in that order. So right now the top one, I'm going to just move all the way over to the right, and then that middle one will bring right in between those. And now I want to kind of stagger their sizes a little bit so that they are going to be a little more contrasty. But right now it's kind of hard to see the outside edges of these since they're all the same color. So you can turn back on your swatches, and this middle one, let's go ahead and make more this yellow color. And then the one we have on the end, I want to change to be, let's say, maybe this brown color here. So I'll go ahead and select that. Okay, so now I'm going to turn back off my swatches, and we'll just get these in place, and then if we want to change the colors or anything else later, we'll be able to do that. So don't forget that you need to change the size of them by using the radius. So I'm just grabbing that effect control and dragging that down, and then I'll do the same thing for the one in the middle. And I think the one in the middle I want to make the smallest, so I'm just going to drag that down a little bit smaller than that larger one. And I may even come back in and grab this first one and scoot it over out from behind our person just a little bit more, just so there's a little more overlap. Make that a little more interesting. And this one, even though it's in the middle of my circles, I think I want this to be on top, just so that because it's so small, I want it to still have a little bit more surface area. So I can go ahead and just kind of keep working with this composition to get that looking right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and scrub and just watch that animation. And that looks pretty interesting. If you wanted to, you could come in there and maybe stagger those, but let's just wait to refine the animation so that we can get all of this working together first. So now what I'm ready to do is add some text on top of these. So I'm just going to scrub backwards right to where these are beginning, and I'm going to trim these layers so that they begin at the point that the reveal starts. So just hold down Alt and hit that open bracket key, and as we learned earlier, that's going to clip those layers and just make it a little bit easier for us to differentiate between the rest of our layers. And now we're going to come over here to the project panel, and I want to start out using the siteviews.ai piece of text, and that's in the form of an Illustrator file. So you can just grab that Illustrator file and drag that onto your comp. And this is the piece of text that I'm going to put on top of the red one. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in between my 2 layers just so that it looks like it's actually on the piece of red and it's not overlapping with that yellow that's right on top of that. So I also want to make this a 3D layer. So once I have that correct in my stacking order, I'll go ahead and turn that on. And then I can move that in position back over to the red circle. And this looks like that put that just about at the right place in Z space when I did that, so that it looks nice with the outside space that we have there on our red circle. And now what I want to do is create a transition for this piece of text to come in. So I want to create a transition where the text almost looks like it's swinging down like a little door or something like that. But I want it to swing along the top. So the first thing that I need to do is change the anchor point position. So go ahead and select that layer and then come up here and grab your pan behind anchor point tool. And we'll just drag that anchor point right there to the top of the piece of text. And then I want the text to swing down right around the time that the circles finished revealing. So I'm going to go ahead and clip this layer using the Alt open bracket keystroke. And you see that that has been clipped right there now. And now what I want to do is add some keyframes. So I'm going to add some rotation keyframes to this. And I'm going to first start out with this swung all the way up so that it's level to the viewer. So once you have that set up, you can come in to your orientation and just go ahead and set that key right there. And I think I'll set it right at the beginning of the layer. So you can drag that keyframe back just holding shift and it's going to snap to the beginning of that layer. And then usually for these types of animations, I like there to be about 7 seconds for it to just be able to move back down to a more flat orientation. So let's move forward 7 seconds. And then I just go ahead and put 0 back in for this value here. And then we can move forward again and we'll allow this to kind of swing backwards. Now we are having a little bit of a problem there because of the positioning of our red circle. So we can take care of that in a moment, but for now, just go ahead and solo the layer that you're looking at so that we can go ahead and get our animation finished up. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this orientation up to about 30 degrees. So I'll just type that in here. And you may not want to have this extra keyframe in here where it hits 0 just so that that remains a little more consistent. So if you don't want to have that key, you can grab your third keyframe and just drag it right on top of the key and it's going to overwrite that key. So now we have an animation that looks a little bit like that. And then I just start kind of dividing this down. So I'm going to move forward just about 5 keys there and then divide the orientation degrees in half. So if we're at 30, I'm going to change this to 15, but it needs to be -15 so that it swings the other way. So go ahead and type in -15 there instead of 30. And you'll see that this causes that to swing forward. And then we'll just scoot forward just about 5 more frames, and then we can change that to 7. And this time it's going to be a +7 instead of 14. So if you can't perfectly divide that, I just usually round it up to the next number. So then we can go forward a little bit more, and we'll do a -3 here. And then that's really just about right. If you want to go forward 5 more, and then you can put a 0. So that's going to bring you back to a perfectly flat animation. So what we've done is we've just added some follow through to this kind of a swinging door animation. It just looks a little more realistic with these last few keyframes there at the end of that animation. And if you really want to make this look a little more realistic, you can select all the keyframes and then go up there to your animation menu, go to Keyframe Assistant and turn on Easy Ease. And that's just going to give you a little bit more of a realistic ease in and out of those keyframes. Okay, so now that we've finished our animation, we need to unsolo our layer. So you can just come over here and check off this solo switch. And notice now that if I scrub this, it's moving through and penetrating the layer that we have there as its background. So we need to move this forward so that it's not having any kind of penetration with the circle and it doesn't appear to be obscured at all. So you want to make sure that you're at the point that your orientation is at 0, because if you've try to move this forward while it's tilted, it's going to move it in the direction that that Z arrow is pointing. So we want this to move directly forward. So I'm just going to start there with my current time indicator at that last keyframe. And then I'm just going to grab it and drag it forward a little bit. And then I can reposition this in that space. And then maybe scale it down just a little bit so that it's not quite so big. If you have a hard time scaling it down using the corner of that and shift, you can just come down there and do it in the transform property. And so now I'm just kind of repositioning this onto that red circle. Okay, so a little bit of a problem that we're going to have now is that this is going to be behind the yellow circle if we continue to try to make this not be penetrating with the red part. So now if I scrub it, you'll notice that we don't have that problem with the red, but the yellow doesn't look like it's in place. So I'm just going to grab this yellow circle and bring it forward a little bit. And then I can also put this on top of the piece of text. So go ahead and continue to drag this forward until that text is obscured. And then if you feel like it's too big, you can just scale it back down to kind of get that composition back that we had earlier. So now I'm able to read my text, and if I scrub this animation, it's not creating any kind of a strange penetration with the red solid. Okay, so now what I want to do is go ahead and do this for two other pieces of text that are going to fit on top of these other circles. And the easiest way for me to do that is simply to copy and replace the piece of text that we've already animated. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and select that piece of Site Views text there. And we'll just hit Control D to duplicate that a couple times. And then I'll drag this one above each of those circles just so that they're staggered in between there. And then let's go ahead and move them so that we're able to reposition those. Okay, so it looks like the one that's going to correspond with our yellow definitely needs to be moved forward. So you can just go ahead and do that, and then scale that down a little bit if you need to. And in a moment, we're going to replace these files just like we learned a few lessons ago how to replace those. So it's going to be easy to adjust the scale of those at that point. So we just want to scrub and make sure that these are not going to penetrate with the solids we have behind them. It looks like the yellow one is doing that just a little bit. So I'm going to scrub forward and move this one forward just a little bit more. And that looks a little bit better. Okay, let's go ahead and replace these two files now. So we're going to come over here, and what I want to use for these are the hashtags.ai and the Facebook likes.ai. So hashtags we can put on this yellow one. So go ahead and grab that, and with the piece of text selected that's on top of the yellow circle, we're just going to alt drag that on there to replace it. And then we'll do the same thing for the other piece of text with the Facebook likes. So select the Site Views text that's there at the top and alt drag onto that piece of text. And because we replaced those, we didn't have to go back in and add any more keyframes or move those anchor points around. So now all you have to do is come in here and scale these back a little bit so that they fit a little bit better on these solids that we've created. Okay, so that looks pretty good right there, and you can always just adjust that a little bit more if you want to get the composition looking a little bit better. But for now, that looks pretty good, and we fixed any of those issues we had where the 3D space was interacting and making that piece of text not readable. So in this lesson, we learned how to combine many of the techniques we've already learned to create an interesting animation that's going to reveal all of this text.